You hear about government debt all the time, right? It's always some massive, mind-boggling number. But what does that number really mean? It's not just sitting there on a spreadsheet. No, it's an active force, one that sends ripples through the entire economy, affecting everything from your local coffee shop to the price of a new car. To understand this, let's go back in time for a second. Picture it. It's 1965. President Lyndon B. Johnson is signing the Higher Education Act. Now, this wasn't just another government program. It was a massive investment in people, in what he called human capital. It created loans and financial aid that, for the first time, threw open the doors of college to millions. It's a perfect example of government spending as this powerful tool for building a better future. And that, right there, brings us to the central question. When a government decides to make these huge, forward-looking investments, spending more than it's taking in from taxes, where does that cash actually come from? It's not magic. It has to be borrowed. And this is where the first domino falls. That act of borrowing kicks off a whole chain reaction of economic effects. If you really want to understand the true price of national debt, both the good and the bad, you have to follow these ripples. The starting point for all this is something called a budget deficit. And honestly, it's pretty simple. It's just like your household finances. If a government spends more in a year than it brings in through taxes, it's got a shortfall. And to cover that gap, it has to borrow. Now, here's the really crucial part. That money doesn't just appear out of thin air. It has to be pulled from somewhere else in the economy. There are really only three main pools it can come from people like you and me if we decide to save more, from businesses if they decide to borrow and invest less, or from other countries. And tapping into each of these pools, well, it has consequences. So let's trace that first major ripple. What happens when the government suddenly becomes the biggest borrower in the room? Well, it can start to squeeze everybody else out. Economists have a great name for this: crowding out. Think of all the available money for loans in the country as one big pool. When the government cannonballs into that pool and starts soaking up huge amounts of capital, there's just less water left for private companies, the ones that want to borrow to build new factories, develop new tech, and create jobs. So in a scenario like this one, with pretty low government borrowing, you can see there's a huge chunk of that financial pool left over for private investment. This is the capital that really fuels innovation and long-term economic growth. But watch what happens when the government runs a big deficit. See that? The government slice of the pie gets way bigger, and the slice for private companies shrinks. It gets crowded out. And over the long term, that can put a real brake on the economy's potential. Okay, so that's the first ripple. But the effects don't stop at the border. In today's world, a decision made about the national budget in one country can send waves all across the globe. So if a government needs to borrow a ton of money, it has to make its debt, things like government bonds, look really appealing to investors. The easiest way to do that? You offer a higher return, and that means you have to raise interest rates. These higher interest rates act like a giant magnet for money from all over the world. Investors in other countries see this great, safe return, and they rush to buy that country's bonds. But here's the key. Before they can buy the bonds, they have to buy the currency. And what happens when everyone wants to buy your currency? Basic economics. Its value goes up. It gets stronger. This, in turn, makes foreign goods cheaper for us to buy, but it makes our goods way more expensive for the rest of the world. And all of that leads to this famous theory called the twin deficits. The idea is that a big government budget deficit often travels with a big trade deficit, where a country is importing more than it's exporting. Now, they're not always perfect identical twins. Maybe they're more like cousins who tend to show up at the same party. But the connection is definitely there. So why does any of this matter to you? Well, because a stronger currency creates clear winners and losers. If you're buying a TV made overseas or planning that trip to Italy, hey, you're winning. Things are cheaper. But if you're a local manufacturer trying to compete with those cheaper imports, or a farmer trying to sell your products abroad, you're losing. It's a huge economy-wide trade-off. But wait, if we end the story there, we're only getting half of the picture. It would be a massive mistake to think all government debt is a bad thing. We have to circle back to where we started, because as it turns out, not all debt is created equal. See, when a government borrows money to invest in things that make the entire economy more productive, well, that's a whole different ballgame. We're talking about things like physical capital, modern roads, high-speed rail, or human capital, better schools and job training, or even new technology through research grants. This kind of debt can actually pay for itself over the long run by sparking more economic growth. So when you put it all together, what are we left with? It's a really complex balancing act. Government debt is, without a doubt, a powerful tool, but it's also a very tricky one. All right, let's do a quick recap. The big takeaways are this. Government borrowing isn't new money, it's just money that's been moved from somewhere else. It absolutely can crowd out private investment. And yeah, it can lead to a stronger currency and a trade deficit. But, and this is a huge but, it can also be the very thing that funds crucial long-term growth for a country. And that leaves us with one final, really important thought. Maybe, just maybe, we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Instead of obsessing over how much debt there is, maybe the more important question is, what are we buying with it? Is it an investment in our future, or is it just paying today's bills? And you know what? That one question changes everything.